Hello, I'm Jim Bremner. Some of you know me, some of you may not, but I'm the president of the Canadian Tactical Officers Association. And as some of you may know, we had to close down for a short period of time, and now we're back. The difference being is we're going to go under the acronym CTOA, and that's just a business peculiarity. So there's not much I can do about that. But we know the brand, and so what changes will you see in the future? We're going to have different reps across the country. We've got Mike Foster in BC. We've got Rich Carina in Alberta to handle the prairie provinces. And we've got, of course, we've got Craig Peddle here in Ontario. We've got myself, Dave Gillis here in Ontario. And further down the road in Quebec, we have Nick Brazeau. And in Maritimes, we have my good friend, Chris Lusso, that probably you all know. So we've got a really good team together. And, the other thing to say is that we have our own brand. It's called Bolo Gear, and you'll be seeing that coming out, and that'll be shoulder bags, backpacks, EDC type equipment, gloves, and that's proprietary to CTOA. As well as that, we become a distribution hub. So anything law enforcement product, military product, from boots to armored vehicles, we can get that to you. And you'll see that coming up over time on the website. The website is under reconstruction, and that's going to take a bit, but it'll be up there, in a rudimentary form, and we'll build over the next coming week. So I'm hoping by, 2-3 months, we'll have all those things up and ready to go. Of course, we're all about training, excellence in training, and there really isn't anything that we can't train you in, from basic use of force all the way to aircraft assault. So we have those instructors. Again, we're a conduit for training, so we can reach out. If you don't see it there, all you have to do is ask, and we will direct you to the subject matter expert in that particular field. And if you don't see a course on our course list, we can design custom-made courses for you for whatever your need is. And we've done that quite a bit, actually, because everybody has unique needs. We're affiliated with Michigan State Tactical Officers Association, Ohio State Tactical Officers Association, and New York Tactical Officers Association. And we're hoping soon to be affiliated with NTOA. And that also is in the works. So lots of things happening. Be honest with you, overwhelmed with the support, but finally this has all come together. And as I said earlier, when I closed it down, there was overwhelming support, like hundreds of people literally emailed me and posted and texted and phoned, and it's all come together. So I appreciate all that support. It means an awful lot to me personally, and it's just going to be bigger and better things for us now. So with that said, this is our first podcast, and my first guest is Craig Peddle. And Craig and I have known each other for 30 years, probably.
Yeah, 30 years or so,
yeah. And I met you, I believe, when was the first iteration of the Gun and Gang Task Force, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
Still
correct.
Kind of a major crime unit.
Yeah, that's correct. We were a pilot project in Toronto at the time,
right? And
brainchild. It was just the start or the precipice of the year of the gun.
Yes, yeah, 2005.
Yeah, 5, 6.
5 or 6, yeah.
And we came for our plainclothes entry course with you, and you were our lead instructor.
That's right.
At the time, and you had all these coppers, police officers from different areas of the city who had, good training, some had crappy training, and we saw that. And then you really helped us lay down.
That was a custom-made course.
It was a custom-made course.
And in fact, most recently, we taught that to Guelph, and they really enjoyed the course. And of course, we get course critiques, and that's not me saying it; that's the students saying it. So that course still lives today. It has some modifications, of course, because times have changed a bit. But yeah, I guess that's where we first met. So you're the original Gun and Gang OG. You're the OG of the Gun and Gang Task Force.
I guess, to coin a phrase. Yeah. I remember when I first Started with a call you young Stevie Lynn from 4th
Oh, sure,
Division.
of course, yeah.
We really started looking at the impact that youth gangs at the time,
Yeah,
to define them with that adjective, youth gangs at the time were really starting to wreak havoc in and around high schools.
and we're seeing that repeated now.
Right? And they say in the gang world, at least, that things repeat themselves every decade or so. Much like pop culture, things repeat themselves.
Yeah,
right?
You're
Right?
Craig's a very humble gentleman, but you are a gang expert.
Correct.
You want to expand on
Correct.
that a little bit?
Yeah.
Weren't you instrumental in Angia?
I was the co-founder, myself and a couple other people.
Sure.
It's in its 22nd year.
Yeah, I just saw a post.
Yeah, that's right. It's in its 22nd year now. So I remember I was at a conference in New York State, and Upper New York State, and it was the East Coast Gang Investigators Association conference, and I was there with a couple colleagues of mine from Toronto, and we were listening to one of their directors speak, and I turned over my napkin that was under my water, and I started doodling, TOGIA, Toronto Gang Investigators Association, and then we just came up with the acronym ONGIA, right? ONGIA.
Because the gangs are very mobile, aren't they? They are necessarily, they're territorial in some cases, but they like the tentacles, they reach out across the province, across actually the country. Right?
Across the country. Most gangs have upper mobility, and I can take you back to the day, certainly not to glamorize a gang, but there was an Asiatic gang, predominantly Asiatic, with the exception of a couple Caucasian people in it, that had such mobility that they set up chapters in Ottawa and they set up chapters in New Brunswick.
Fascinating.
And extremely fascinating. And the old theory is, or the old rule of thumb with criminal street gangs is that because of that upward mobility, you can't forget that they have to sleep somewhere.
Of course, yeah.
So where they're territorial in their neighborhood and their blocks around their neighborhood, it's 1, 2, 3 crew or 1, 2, 3 gang.
Right, understood. Yeah.
They have to sleep somewhere,
right?
So then, if they have a baby mother, or they have a girlfriend, or someone that they're
significant other,
shall we say, in a different neighborhood, that oftentimes causes conflict because now you have an outsider from geographic area A going to geographical area C, for example.
Understood.
And if they're from a different ideology, like if they're a Crip or they associate with the Crip or the Folk Nation, then they might be in conflict if someone's the Bloods or the People Nation.
And I would imagine that the people stereotype gangs.
I think
in terms of ethnicity or belief systems, as you said.
Yeah, agreed.
But I think isn't the urban gang in Vancouver? It's all people of all different mix.
It is indeed,
and so that actually makes it harder for gang investigators, I would imagine.
100%. Race, when we speak about race with criminal street gangs, race is not a factor, generally speaking.
Sure, yeah.
Gangs are ubiquitous.
It's all about money.
Right? It's all about money and territory and respect.
Sure.
At the end of the day, the bottom line is that criminal street gangs want exactly what you and I want. We want love.
Upward mobility.
We want money. Yeah. We want freedom.
Sure.
We want to be heard.
Right.
We want to be seen. And above all else, we want respect. Right. Whether that's perceived or real respect. Because I'm afraid of you doesn't mean I respect you.
Understood. Yeah.
But my interpretation is that you respect me, even though it's fear. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Yeah.
Fear is the equivalent of respect.
Sure.
So their need for all the things that any human being needs in a pack, they just...
Well, we all are social animals, which will kind of bring us to our next topic. I just want to finish up there. So when a gang member goes into corrections, I know there's gang problems in the correction system. Does that carry through? Like, do they control the people that are not in corrections?
Yes,
and correct them? And
yes and no. Generally speaking, the old adage, out of sight, out of mind.
Okay.
So if Big EC, he goes into jail, he's incarcerated for 5 years less than
Sure, which is a lot in Canada.
So he's incarcerated for 5 years less than for accessory to an aggravated assault, let's say.
Right.
He will run his own crew because he was the leader from the street.
I see. Okay.
So he'll run his own crew inside. other people who are
Right.
incarcerated or other groups that are associated to.
Do they
that
recruit when they're in corrections?
They do indeed. Yeah,
Oh.
they do indeed. Right.
Fascinating.
It's for protection,
Sure.
right? For
Yeah.
the for the most part, it's for protection.
Yeah.
But it also allows that shingle to be waived, those colors to be waived when someone gets out of prison.
Sure.
So it's not uncommon for someone from geographical area A
Right.
to be incarcerated with the same person from geographical area E.
Correct.
They may be rivals, they may have completely different ideologies out on the street. But if it means that when they align inside prison,
Mm-hmm.
it benefits them and their protection and their strength in a
Right.
real way inside the joint.
Right.
When they leave prison, they have an understanding that they respect each other, that they've been to battle with each other, so to
Understood.
speak.
Yeah.
And then those lines
Okay.
stay meshed together
I see.
when they're outside.
So they're affiliates
Correct.
mostly.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And that phenomenon,
Fascinating.
getting back to the race phenomenon, we have hybrid gangs mostly in Canada.
Yeah, it seems to be more common now.
Very common. And we saw that trend about 10 or 15 years ago really start to proliferate in Canada, where it's not ethno-based gangs. They do exist, of course, understood.
Yeah.
And but we're seeing the opportunity for people of all walks of life from every community
Right.
can join a gang because it's all about money.
Yeah.
Right?
Of
It's all
course.
about power. It's all about control.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll have you in. We'll have a gang
Sounds great.
podcast, and
Sounds
we'll
great.
learn a little bit more about how that. I'm fascinated by it, as a matter of fact.
As am I.
So let's move on to PTSD zone. What's that about?
PTSD Zone is a not-for-profit registered in Canada.
Okay.
It's kind of it is I guess a mental child that I've had in my brain for the last 10 years. I didn't know what the name of it would be. I didn't know what it was going to do.
Well, you're creating. You're an artist,
Right?
So you're
creating.
yeah.
We're using
I
that
don't know,
side of my brain.
Did they
right?
name the picture before or when it's finished?
Actually, funny you say that. The way my brain works is I get an idea conceptually and I'll doodle it or I'll draw it or I'll get on the computer and I'll design a graphic.
Yeah.
And then I'll work around that. So that's my palette of what it could be. So PTSD Zone was something that I created after a decade. I've suffered from PTS, both knowingly and unknowingly.
Well, so let me just stop you there. You mentioned PTS without the D.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that?
There are some people who feel it's a stigma to use the D for disorder. Right?
Yeah. In the military, in fact, that's true.
Right. So one might often hear PTSI, which is post-traumatic stress injury.
Sure.
PTS, post-traumatic stress.
Right.
It's not a disorder. Everyone has a brain. This can be a natural.
So you're normalizing.
Right. Right. So trying to remove the stigma for those that suffer from PTSD, and there are many variations of it and incarnations of it. So this was a concept that I had, having suffered for the last 29 years or so. And as I say, knowingly and unknowingly, for the longest time, I didn't know really what was wrong with me.
Are you able to talk a bit about that? If it's difficult, I understand.
I can. So there was a police officer who was killed in the line of duty.
Oh, yes, our good friend,
Yeah, John Knight was killed in the line of duty in a horrific motor vehicle accident. My partner and I were the first responders there, and I was the first person to attempt to save his life, to give him AR, and there are many issues surrounding it that I'm still challenged
Can
by.
I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt
please,
you.
go ahead.
So you attempted to give him AR.
Yeah.
That's based in training.
Right.
Anywhere along the line in that training, did the instructors say that it doesn't always work?
Never.
We're not mentally prepared for a negative outcome.
Never. And that is one of the things that really bothered me.
Sure.
And still does to this day, is that I received training, as we all do when we go through the academy, and it's changed now, of course.
Yes, it does.
right? For the good and for the bad.
Yeah.
But I was never instructed on what to do with it. And we had legacy bosses who had 30 years on us at that time.
Of course, yeah.
I had 2 years on the job.
Yeah. Actually, guys stayed on the job longer back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And girls.
Right. And it was always, back in the saddle,
Yeah, mount up. Let's
mount
go.
up, take as much time off as you need, and then you get the call
But
3 days later, you come back for night shift.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but training on how to even understand that you've been shell shocked a little bit.
Oh, 100%. So just let me jump in on that.
Yeah.
There's a great George Carlin video where he talks about what we call it now, PTSD. We'll settle on that. But he goes from shell shocked to First World War, Second World War, is battle fatigue. As we get into Vietnam, it becomes a syndrome, post-traumatic stress syndrome, and it becomes a disorder. And clearly, we just can't put a label on this, but we know there's something out there, right? We know it exists. And what's fascinating, I'm an old movie buff. If I'll take the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance because it's probably the most clear in that movie. But they're trying to reflect that in John Wayne's character, that there's a huge change once he takes that life. And I'll go further than that. There's actually a Lassie movie, The Dog, where it was a courier during, I believe it's World War I. And it obviously traumatized by shells going off around it. It runs away and somebody takes it and it turns into a very vicious dog until somebody that understands and gives it time and brings it back around, and it becomes the Lassie that we all love. But what I'm getting at is that we've been acknowledging this for the longest time, but yet we're just not sure how to deal with it.
Right. And for the longest time, I think even amongst, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
There you go.
For the longest time, post-traumatic stress, battle fatigue, whatever one wants to label it historically, was always considered a junk science, even amongst the greatest.
Some people still consider
doctors.
Psychology as a junk science,
Correct.
Believe it or not.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And that therein lies the point, is that how can we change? We know that time and talk heals.
Well, for me, time has done a lot, and a very experienced individual, when on the onset of it, he called and said, "Jimmy, just give it time," and he was 100% right. 100%.
Yeah, agreed. For me, time and talk has been, one of the greatest realities in my, my affliction, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I'll call it that, my affliction, in so much as, you weren't allowed to grieve. You weren't expected to grieve.
Or how long is it going to take you?
Or how long is it going to take you?
Right.
What do you mean?
Yeah, you can grieve, but how long is that going to take?
What do you mean you're off again?
Yeah.
What are you off with?
Sure.
So then it's not an experience unique to me, but it affects your physiology. It affects everything about your metabolism. It affects everything about...
Well, there's also the risk of re-traumatizing yourself because policing and soldiers, firefighters, medics, we're the only group out there that has to re-inject ourselves into things, again, through evolution. If I got bit by a snake, I don't go near snakes. But we have to go back into face that snake, like it or not, because that's our duty. That's our sworn oath. And so that trauma can compile and become the monkey on your back. Right. And it's hard to shake that monkey off sometimes.
It's so true. And I think for us, the greatest gain that we've had in recent years on this challenge of post-traumatic stress is the presumptive legislation. I think that's really done a wonderful thing.
Yeah, 100%.
In so many ways.
Yeah.
And, Dr. Katie was a big proponent for that, and a big medical psychological resource to explaining to the government that this is a real thing, to articulate what you just
100%
said.
it is.
It is a real thing.
Absolutely.
You know it. You have lived experience as a survivor yourself.
100%.
You understand that time will heal all wounds, as they say, right?
For me, I found that actually that was, it's done a lot, because you know, in the beginning it's very intense, but over time it wanes, and over years you have more understanding. You know, you speak to more people. You just have the way you see the world changes, and then you kind of become friends with it, and it sort of, like I said, it wanes. It just kind of sits in the background, the back shelf somewhere.
It's true. It lays dormant. And speaking of laying dormant, to bring back the parallel to criminal street gangs, and if you bear with me for a second,
not at all.
Is part of the training that we used to do for new members of the unit who wanted to sharpen their skills on gang member debriefing, gang member interviewing, and, you know, professional interrogations. Excuse me. They needed to understand that 99, right, anecdotal, but 99%, 9 out of every 10 of those gang members that you had in custody and you're going in to debrief or interview them, you have to understand that they've suffered trauma at some point in their life.
Well, it usually has something nature, nurture, and I would hazard a guess that the upbringing wasn't pleasant.
Correct. They've experienced or were victims of something themselves, or experienced or were victimized multiple times throughout their life. So their propensity towards violence or their acceptance towards the street culture, you know, in parentheses, can easily be brought back to that traumatic point or multiple traumas in their life. And, you know, I remember when we used to debrief people, and new detectives would come with me or then my partner, and learn the ways of speaking with people.
And it truly is though, speaking with people. It's not like the old Jimmy Cagney movie with the light over somebody's head and the guy standing over them and screaming at them.
That's right.
Because it got us nowhere. Right. True. So coming in and basically having, you know, some professional empathy, I'll call it that. And it makes a big difference in how you get them to kind of open up about whatever the offense might have been, or how they participate in the gang and how the gang works.
That's right. And if we go back to...
So it's a human, isn't that fascinating?
Correct. Yeah. If we go back to the respect ideology or mindset of gang members, is that if you show them respect, oftentimes you'll go into a room and they'll have their arms tucked into a shirt.
Isn't that fascinating?
And by the end of the interview, they're willing to give you a fist bump or a shake. And because you've respected them, you cared enough.
I don't know if there's any body language people out there listening, but to me, it looks like they're trying to hide. Because you see that, I mean, you can watch, you know, all these American law enforcement, what's the first 48, those programs. And typically when you see the person in the interview room, they kind of pull their arms into the shirt. And both of us have seen that over, you know, 30 years or more. And I often wonder, is that some way of trying to hide? Because the rooms are empty. There's a table, there's a chair, and it's empty. So there's really no physical concealment you can get.
I liken it to a turtle.
A
turtle has built-in body armor.
Yes.
It's protected from its predators.
Yeah.
So humans don't have body armor unless we wear manufactured protection. People will turtle. You see it in sports, you see it's that fight or flight.
So again, you're back to the human connection that joins all of us together.
To the brain, the human connection that brings us all to the same place.
Okay, so let me ask you about PTSD Zone, the conference. It's coming up shortly.
Yeah, it's coming up at the end of May. So the 29th, 30th, and 31st
and of May.
It's at Ajax Convention Center in Durham Region, Ontario. So it's just 35 minutes outside of Toronto. To the east of Toronto. It's an amazing venue. I've been there before.
I was there a number of years ago.
It's a great venue. The purpose of what we're trying to accomplish is to offer that thing we've just pre-paved this conversation with, is that human interaction. This interaction, you and I, we're in a very close proximity to each other, real live interaction with people. So some of that,
what I'm hearing is where you might go to a lecture, listen to a speaker. Actually, some of the connectivity, more significant connectivity, might be between two individuals that go for lunch and say, "Well, you know what, your story sounds a lot like my story," and you can share and see, and through that you normalize this thing called PTSD or whatever we're calling it currently.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. If you look at the benefit of networking, and I don't mean online networking. I don't
No,
mean Zoom.
I think it's and if we look at law enforcement, we lose about 400 to 500 officers a year to suicide in North America. Soldiers, it's even higher. It's an astronomical number. But I think I think that's the problem. At the root of the issue is that we deal with people. You just can't walk away, right? And same with nurses and firefighters and medic doctors. When you're dealing, you can't put a human on the shelf and come back tomorrow and go back to work. It's not like a document or anything else. And I think that's partly what traumatizes us, but again, can help us. To me, make it simple. I can't get therapy or understanding online. I can't get it from a machine.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
Right.
So, and in fact, I'm speaking today at the Toronto Police Service Human Trafficking Conference on PTSD. But people say, Jimmy, well, you haven't been out on the lecture circuit as much as you used to be. And I'll be quite honest with you, some of these things that are online and how it's become like a snake oil thing. And I find for me to help somebody, it's direct contact.
Correct.
And as you know, I'll talk to anybody from anywhere. I'll meet them for coffee, and for me, what I'm trying to say is, to me, it's a total human thing that you have to be with another person.
Correct, and that's what we're going to be bringing at the end of May to the conference, is that human interaction.
Sure.
So if you look at any of the emergency services personnel, how do we learn? We learn academically.
Yeah.
We learn through controlled environments, physical activities, training, and we also learn from anecdotes.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that the anecdotes being taught to you from someone who has experience like you, experience like me, being taught by somebody.
Almost like an elder handing down.
Correct. Those anecdotes, hey kid, don't do this. Hey kid, I know you're supposed to do this. That's what they teach you at the college, but do it this way.
Well, I know why my parents had those sayings that you don't hold your face that way. I'll stay like that forever.
It's true.
Most of them are true.
It's true, right? It's so true. And those adages that we were taught being young on the job are still being taught. Mm-hmm. Even though we're not there, they're still being taught.
Well, again, it's the human connection.
Yeah. Right. So the takeaway, you're right. There's an old, saying when giving testimony, the judge or the jury is going to determine within 5 minutes of when you start speaking whether or not they believe what you're saying and if they're favorable to you.
Well, again, it's we argue the facts, the law, and the credibility. Right. That's what a lawyer is thinking of.
100%. Right. 100%. So that's the primary goal of the conference, is to.
So that goes back to another parent saying, first impression means
lasts a lifetime.
Lasts a lifetime. So if you're going to court, probably want to make a good impression.
It's true. From the moment you walk through the back door, from the moment you get up from your chair, and you pass the bar tables and go back out and do your bow to the judge, they've got eyes on you. They're judging everything you're doing.
Judged.
Right? They're judging everything you're doing. So I think that we can, and having the experience of the gang association for 20 years, we've trained tens of thousands of people. So we bring to this conference in May, the PTSD Zone Conference, we bring that experience there where we'll be able to use the lessons we've learned on how to deliver a dynamic, engaging, fun, networking, and academic conference. So you get both.
You can learn having fun.
Absolutely.
Playing.
Especially on a hard topic like this one. You can have fun with PTS, right? And I've learned that myself over the last couple of years.
We can't take ourselves too seriously.
You can't. You cannot take yourselves too seriously. So we have a seating capacity of 150 delegates.
Good size.
Really good size. We've just secured a rack rate, a discounted rack rate for the Hilton that's right attached to the conference center.
So rack rate is kind of military type talk about.
Yes.
So that would be
The cheapest negotiated price for your
For
bunk, for your room.
hotel.
Right, for your hotel. So your hotel accommodations are fairly cheap. We're really looking forward to it. It's inclusive of continental breakfast at the conference
Nice.
site. Lunch is paid for. And we're right now looking at partnerships so we can provide a banquet. So there'll be an awards banquet. If we can get the right partnerships along the way here, to have a banquet and a sit-down dinner one of the days.
So if anybody's listening, you want to help out,
Yeah, you can
you
go
know,
to
in that capacity,
ptsdzone.com and you can reach us there.
and that's how we can get a hold of you.
Yeah, at ptsdzone.com, or by email, contact@ptsdzone.com. Two easy ways to get a hold of us. And it's really happened. I never believed that there would be such an interest in people saying, how can we help? How can we support? I cannot come to the conference, but I'm sending you best wishes. Or, yeah, we're sending 3 people. I think that with social media now, for lack of a better term, or social connectivity, I think people are so used to just swiping or however they do it on their computer that their absorption ability, I think, has waned in the last little while.
Yeah.
So that I think that if people have to actually sit down on their notebook or their iPad or their electronic device and actually have to look at a website, I think it lingers a little bit longer.
I went across the street to get some water for today, and they actually had newspapers, like real newspapers made of newsprint.
Yeah.
But you know what? They're really thin. There's not a lot just in there, and they find when you do go on I post news articles every day, and what's frustrating is most of them are videos now.
Right.
And people would rather use an emoji than a word.
It's true.
That's another podcast, but things have changed a lot. But so in a nutshell, that's how we get a hold of you, and that's where it is.
And that's
and
where,
of course, I'll be, posting and talking about it. And I think I'm a guest there.
Yes, you are. We're honored to have you speaking.
All right.
And as I understand it, you're going to have some of your books. If you have not read Jimmy's book, please do. Cracking the Armor. I've read it at least 3 or 4 times. I've passed it along to many friends, many colleagues.
That's 3 more times than I've read it.
Right? That's not true. You've read it. I couldn't imagine how many times you read the manuscript and got 3/4 of the way through and said, yeah, I remember the ending. Right. Which we never get rid of the ending. Right? We always know the ending.
So, all right. So the other exciting thing I want to say is that Craig is coming on board CTOA. And again, he'll be our gang expert, our PTSD expert, and we'll be able to get a hold of him. He'll be able to get reached by the new email address will be Craig P at CTOA.ca. Right. So again, really exciting stuff, a lot of experience, and again, can help in many different ways. Right. So as I said earlier, if you don't see it on the web or on the website, the course, certainly we can design it or get you to the expertise that you require. So that's it for today. I want to thank Grant O'Sullivan, our producer. Does a great job, looks after me. And that's not an easy job to do. So thanks very much for your time, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Out.